why does a king exist, rightly understood? Why does a hero exist? And then underneath that, why would a protagonist exist, a main character, for their own pleasure, for their own, aggrandizement? Like why? Mm-hmm. It's like, or to go sacrifice, to go assume risk, to go take the hit for others.
Yeah.
You're there to try to help them. You see it in dads who I had a long day. I don't want to talk right now.
Yeah.
It's like all that. You see it in moms who just seek pragmatic efficiency, and that kind of flattens children. And you also see it in families that impose family time like it's some kind of purgation. I know all of your friends are out playing sand volleyball, but we are sitting here and staring at each other and listening to Dad's devotional on a Friday night.
Right.
Like,
are you pitting the Bible against being outside in the summer?
Yeah. What are you replacing? What are you doing? So that trade-off, whenever you're making an exchange, the trade-off reinforces and catechizes the kids to value it or not.
Met a ghost of a king on the road when I first fell. Fire burning to my knees I fell. Met a ghost of a king on the road.
Here we are.
Stories are soul food, creeping toward 160.
The world has not ended yet. The way you know is because we're still podcasting.
Oh, yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, we definitely would not be podcasting if the world was ending. I was going to say, would that be the last thing we do? And it's no.
I think it'd be fun to do one into the abyss, cast a pod.
Yeah. No, it turns out
How do you feel about the apocalypse, Brian?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you.
The food shortages.
We aren't going to turn into a contemporary events podcast, but
we always have been a little bit. Like whatever happens to be in the ether.
I mean, the speculation about whether Biden was dead or alive or aware has been fascinating. I think there was a video of him walking this morning onto a plane. So
there's a video of someone walking this morning, Brian. I'll say this. I actually am pretty confident that tweet went out without his approval or knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the hand got forced. Because the way the way Jill Biden especially was hanging on, and the way Biden was hanging on, just death gripping, and everybody was like, "You really need to go. You need to be done." And then a Sunday afternoon tweet,
no video.
There's no
digital signature.
But also a weird signature, an unusual signature for him. No letterhead, just nothing to confirm its reality except for the fact that it came from this Twitter account. I would be happiest if it was a hacker. So in my heart, the thing that would make me the most pleased would be if somebody actually resigned the president from outside.
A rogue intern.
Yeah.
The CrowdStrike CEO.
Yeah, exactly. So somebody hacks in and resigns Joe Biden, and they don't have the ability to put the mud back in the sack. And that would make me happiest. I actually don't think that's probably the case. I think what happened is somebody launched under pressure from other people, launched preemptively, and there's just no possible way to put it back. And also Joe and Jill ranting at the people who launched preemptively, no matter how angry they might be, no matter how much rage might be there, if the person who launched preemptively is actually doing so connected to the actual power structure as opposed to Joe Biden, then they're safe.
Yep.
So anyway, reading this particular narrative, it's amusing.
Livid for 4 days, followed up by finally coming out, and
it's amusing.
The weird recordings of still this weird self-congratulatory stuff.
Yeah, it's odd. Kamala saying, "I know you're still on the call, Joe."
Yeah. Like almost saying recording.
What's going on? It's so bizarre. It's so weird. And also, let me just say, it's a simple question. As we look at the characters, we look at the narrative in which we exist, what would the progressive left, and we could even just say the shadow government, the shadow government that has been in power behind Joe Biden,
yeah.
Like he's not been the shot caller.
You're not referring specifically to the deep state, but the actual people who are making the decisions right now.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the deep state, the ingrained
Bureaucracy.
administration bureaucrats. I'm talking about whoever the shadow government is, whatever the shadow government structure is that makes the decisions right now, because Joe Biden does not make those decisions. He has not been making decisions for a long time. Everybody's known this.
Right.
So that shadow government, the question is, what would they do to remain in power, to retain power?
Yeah. And I think we know from history that it's anything. They would do anything.
They would do anything. And I think the answer here is anything they could get away with.
Right.
Or anything they had a reasonable expectation that they would be able to get away with.
So us looking at it and trying to make sense of this is not necessarily the right rubric. Like, what we think of as the typical democracy, let's pick two candidates who can fight out, we'll have the best. Like that's a silly rubric for thinking about what's going on right now. Right now it's shadow government wondering, can we hang on with Kamala as our puppet, you think?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, because I can't see any other reason for picking her unless it's your question of, can we, your idea, can we just nuke it?
So there's a chance, like if she makes it, if they're able to do that, there's a chance that they retain power. Very low.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a chance. But if she gets used up, she gets burned, it's fine.
Right. And they can just say, hey, America and Trump is patriarchal. They rejected a woman president. They're just part of the same narrative starting 6 months too early.
Yep.
That we were already going to have.
And the speed, the hypocrisy and the speed of the switch. So the unironic charges at Trump for being too old. Like that he's too old. He's too old to, you're like, what? what's going on?
Yeah.
Also, people calling Trump a coward for not committing to debating Kamala. She's not the actual nominee yet. A sitting president with 99% of the vote was the presumptive nominee. She's not the nominee, so why would he just empower her that way? B, we just all saw him get shot on live TV, and we saw the reaction. We know cowardice, scared of Kamala, is kind of not actually the case.
Also, her unburdened by what it has been.
Unburdened.
No one is scared of debating.
No, this is a woman, and I love this, by the way. I mean, I love it. So the whole narrative of it is fantastic and impossible and so far-fetched. And what I told you about, we're in that part of the empire where you have a whole bunch of Caesars in succession and that don't matter.
Yeah.
We're about to have our first woman president. That first woman president is going to be a woman who got less than 1% of the Democratic vote. Less than 1%. Do you think Biden's out by the end before the end of this year? No, there's no.
He can't last.
Kamala is our first woman president. She will be a sitting president prior to the election. And that's amazing. That's awesome to me. It's so fantastic because you want to know what God does to idols. You want to know what God does to like hubristic empires.
Yeah.
He lays them low. This woman
it's the emperor with no clothes.
I use a technical term. This woman started out as a booty call for Montel Williams.
No, the videos are insane.
So she's holding the hand in a polyamorous framework.
Well, I think that was actually his daughter.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hopefully not then. So, but I don't put anything past all these psychos.
It was Twitter noted as in, to be clear, this is not a side. This is the main. Kamala is not a side.
Kamala was the main?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, anyways, she's holding hands with a daytime TV personality. Right. She's a hoochie.
Yes.
She's playing that role. She's trying to play that role. She plays that. She moves from daytime TV personality to politicians, and she moves up the chain that way. She tries to run for office, gets destroyed in the primaries, has to drop out with less than 1%, is the DEI vice president for the old and alien Joe Biden. And then he is running right into the jet turbine engine of reality at the moment.
And she left.
And she's going to be the president.
Holding the scepter.
She's going to be the president. If she is not a sitting president by the time of the election, I will be truly shocked.
Yeah.
And I mean, and it warms my heart weirdly because I love the historicity, the high historicity that was pursued by Hillary as the first woman president. I think it's hilarious that the first one could be the side chick, the main chick. The main chick of Montel Williams into a political mistress, and then up into a DEI vice president, and then into the presidency, where she's challenging a billionaire TV personality himself. At that moment, you just have to say, "Man, what an American story!"
And I think the attitude of being cheerful is a big part of what's important.
Jump down onto the red carpet with Montel Williams and grab his little chick there and pull her aside and be like, "You're going to be the future president of the United States. How does it feel?" She's like, that's not even the game she's playing right then. It's like, she's just trying to get into the hottest parties at that particular moment. And so the hilarity of God doing this to us.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of her finishing Biden's term. I obviously hate the idea of a Kamala administration.
Right.
But the whole thing is just too much fun.
No, yeah.
It's too much fun.
That's the only thing you can do is enjoy it, because when the emperor has no clothes, you can't be the guy still on the side talking about how great he is.
But think about this. Think about just cringe comedy, like cringe TV, Michael Scott in The Office, cringe moments when you're just like feeling pain. Mm. We have reached the place where the most powerful empire in history, the most powerful nation on the planet right now, has transitioned into cringe comedy in the halls of power. It's all cringe. And let's admit it. Donald Trump is cringe.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful to him for the justices, but Orange Man bad. Orange Man is pretty funny. His taste is ridiculous. His whole narrative is ridiculous.
I mean, golfing with Bryson right now being the major, watching him hit minus or 22 under from the senior holes and everyone being so excited and him being pumped, like that. It's just funny. He's just like, I did it, and it's very cool. But also, is that what our president is for?
Yes, it is.
I think that's what you're saying is that.
Yeah, it's so
God puts the idol there. Yeah.
Would we prefer like huge amounts of a sensation of awe and holiness associated with the federal government? It is a clown show, and it feels like a clown show. Now, it is a life or death clown show. They're trying to kill each other. Like, it's bad because let me ask on the flip side, what would Trump do to get power? And the answer is anything he could get away with.
Right.
What would the left do to retain power? Anything they could get away with. That's where we are. It's like, what would Nero do to hold power?
Right.
What would Tiberius have done to hold power? Anything they could get away with.
Right.
This is what the heart of man does when you're holding power.
When a Roman emperor nominates his horse to a Senate seat, he does it because he can get away with it.
Yeah, he can.
Yeah.
So I find the moment to be pretty magnificent. I will be shocked if Kamala is not our first female president. But I think it'll be brief, be a few months, and it will be exactly like I was saying, like the rapidity of these administrations, like we're just, and then there was Kamala Harris for a minute.
Right. We're about to have, if it's timed right, we could have a year of 3 presidents. We get Biden out at the start of January.
Yep.
Kamala in, then Trump in. And we're close to ancient Rome at that point.
And I'll say this, the ridiculousness of the assassination attempt as we see more and more footage coming out and, more and more confirmation, man, Cheadle just stuck her tongue in a buzzsaw up at the congressional hearings. The footage of people filming the dude wriggling up the roof and yelling at cops. And there's just tons and tons of film of this guy.
Yeah.
And hundreds of people in the crowd yelling that there's a guy on the roof and he's climbing. He's at the bottom of the roof when they're yelling this and filming him. They saw him on the ladder. He's trying to inchworm his way up, and he's got a long way to go before he can get a shot off. It's like, what kind of absolutely ramshackle operation are we running here? And it's like, well, we're running the kind that's going to grab the main chick of Montel Williams,
right,
and a dude who ran reality shows and has hyper shiny, real estate developments, and we're going to throw them together in the cataclysm of the statesman of the ages. I mean, it's
in the Robin Hood cartoon, in the scene where Little John's getting carried by all the people in the parade tent and they're all running really fast. He says, "Who's driving this flying umbrella?" And that he's like looking around, and that's the stage we're at.
Yeah,
it's flying umbrella.
No, we are
stage.
absolutely in the cartoon. We are in cartoon mode. So, before we jump on to anything else we're going to talk about today, I would say the thing that matters is what you already called out, is that people need to remember that the author has not been fired.
Right.
That God is on his throne. And when really powerful infrastructures start throwing like a girl, like it's just the
like you put it,
when
Dagon falls down on his face and hands and head break off, that's a sign of this isn't on accident.
Nebuchadnezzar is on his hands and knees eating grass.
Right.
Most powerful man in the world. And
you'd better bet it was easier for the Babylonians to disguise that was going on.
Yeah. And here we are. But I would say that Nebuchadnezzar is the U.S. We are on our hands and knees eating grass. And that is not outside of God's control. It is in God's control. It's part of the narrative. It's what happens. The intensely powerful, haughty, proud, like this is what happens. We're on our hands and knees eating grass, and our confidence is not in Rome. Our confidence is not in DC. Our confidence is in the Lord, that he is still on his throne and he's telling a story, and he's deriding his enemies the way he always does. He's laying low idols of the age as he always does. And he'll play pretty rough.
Yeah.
So he spared Trump. We're grateful that he did.
Yeah.
And then immediately after that, we move into this next phase. So I really didn't think, like I said on this podcast, I didn't think there's any chance of them burning a viable candidate, in this fight.
They did.
But that doesn't mean that they won't fight to the absolute death.
I mean, they have nothing to lose at this point.
So when Trump beat Hillary, they were proud and confident, and they just believed themselves to be in control, and they lost. Right now, they're underdogs. And so their desperation and how far they're going to be willing to go is not to be underestimated.
And some people really objected to your calling out conspiracy theories as being unviable.
Did I really?
Well, not as just you basically said, hey, you don't need to make conspiracy theories your identity in our past episode.
Don't feel like you need to know everything.
Right.
Yeah.
And we have people digging deep into all the FBI connections to this shooter, and they're all there. They're connected with CrowdStrike. It's like just enough weird
he was
stuff.
in a BlackRock commercial. It's like,
just
whatever. The fact is that I mean, it's a big old so what?
Yeah.
We cannot possibly adjudicate this from where we sit. However, technology has given us the sensation that we can, the false sensation that we can. And it's like being, it's a weird wish fulfillment when conspiracists dive in and they start doing all this research and everything else. It's a very odd form of pornography. It's just like a guy.
Pleasure.
Just like a guy who thinks that he has access to all these women in the world when he doesn't. He's got access to this false lie of all these women, this sensation that he's got these women when he doesn't actually have the women. All of the conspiracy stuff, when people go down the rabbit holes and they start chasing it, they have this sensation, this false sensation that they are the judge. They are not the judge. They are not Congress with a congressional subpoena. They aren't. But
I think you're right. Like watching people get into the Rittenhouse trial, as if each social media member live streaming this was going to be the person
Yeah.
who can declare guilt or innocence on Kyle Rittenhouse or a million other, even, and then followed shortly by Johnny Depp and his ex-wife. That's mockery.
The upside here is that it's exposed the mainstream media and the way the mainstream media has been trying to control everything by controlling the so-called truth. They could just control which information came out, so they could control everybody's perception. Now social media has done the opposite, and the internet has done the exact opposite. And instead of having the mainstream media feel like they have a grip on everything, it makes the individual dude with Reddit think that he's got everything under control. He also does not. So because of how bad the mainstream media was and so complicit and so dirty, obviously I'm grateful that a lot of that bubble has burst, but way too many people have gotten into this psychosis. And it's the same psychosis that happens to an incel dude. The psychosis that they are the adjudicator, they are the investigator. If only they dig a little deeper, if only they look a little farther, if only they share a little bit more on social media, then they'll be able to expose the truth. The truth is theirs to find. And what they need to do is take a breath and trust God. Like, just, you can sit back and you can be entertained and you're like, whoa, look at this rabbit trail and look at this thread. That's interesting. But it's like having a drink. It's like having a little bit of whiskey.
It's heady.
Should you have 3, 4, 5? Like, no, you should not. Like, stop, cut it off. Right. Don't do that deep dive. Don't chase that as if you are the adjudicator of all of these things. It's just not healthy. Remember, as I've said before, what was the fruit on the tree that destroyed us?
Knowledge of good and evil.
The knowledge of good and evil. We are not built for it.
Yeah. Like,
someday we'll grow into it. We'll mature into it as we are refined.
Or I guess maybe you should say we always want it before we are ready.
Yeah, we're not built for it.
It's the immaturity.
Yeah, we have to be like actually resurrected into it. This is not a thing that we can just achieve on this planet, that now I am capable.
You don't think God was going to give it to Adam eventually?
Sure.
Oh, okay. But after the post-resurrection,
I'm talking about man as like cursed man.
Oh, okay.
Currently, not immortal man.
Sure.
I'm not talking about the second Adam. The second Adam can actually absolutely handle the knowledge of good and evil, and through him we will.
Okay.
But we are not built for it. We cannot handle it. We are the ones who break. We cannot handle it. It's not an evil to know good and evil, to just know all of it. It's not at all evil, but it's definitely beyond our capacity.
Just like putting a cinder block on a toy boat. Just like we flip it and go down.
Yep. And it's super easy. This is not complicated.
Yeah.
Like, just isn't complicated.
I mean, I think
there's plenty of good things that we should not be part of, that we should not know about. And there's plenty of evil things that we should not be part of and we should not know about. And to know about either of them would crush us.
Yeah.
And this, we just throw ourselves into it as if finding out is always a positive good. And it is not. Yeah. It just isn't.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it seems like we've lost the conception of duty as, what is your duty? What's your role?
What's your role? What are your obligations?
And especially democracy plays into that as well, where our role is to be everything, depending on what we're interested in the moment. And that sort of misunderstanding of, hey, what's my job right now? For me, discovering whether the CrowdStrike guy who sold his stock before the crash knew it was connected to the shooter, that so what for me? That doesn't matter for me.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Maybe. I mean, sure. Why wouldn't he?
Yeah. If he found out.
I mean, it's
right.
all stupid. I mean, that outage was amazing as well. And am I ever going to know exactly what happened?
Also, the fact that Southwest equipment was too old to be affected by CrowdStrike, so all this flights stayed up. It does feel like comedy.
Yeah, it is comedy. It's just comedy. So we're getting popped over and over and over again, and we need to breathe.
Yeah,
breathe. And if you're not enjoying yourself, as a rule of thumb for anybody, if you are not enjoying yourself, and if you are not enjoying God and his authorship and his control over all of mankind and the nations, thrones, dominations, everybody.
Yeah.
God has it. If you're not enjoying his control of the hummingbird and the Secret Service, if you're not embracing that and at peace with it and joyful right now, then you need to stop reading stuff.
Yeah.
You need to get off the internet. You need to get off of Twitter. You need to walk away. You're not up to it.
Yeah.
Just stop. If your joy
totally.
is being affected, if your ability to go through your day as good weather for everyone around you, like everyone you come into contact with, if your ability to go through your day as good weather for everyone around you is hampered by what you're reading and what you're studying, knock it off. Walk away from it.
Yeah, I just got back from a backpacking trip with the 6th and 7th grade Logos boys, and that's such a great sort of palate cleanser.
Yeah.
As you're out in the woods with a bunch of 11 to 12-year-olds. We ate rattlesnake.
Nice.
You know, a new metaphor for the most tasteless meat ever.
I've had it.
Yeah.
I didn't find it tasteless.
You didn't think it was tasteless?
Magnificent.
How did you cook it?
Do
you remember? Just fire
on a
broiled?
skillet with cheese.
See, okay. So ours was on a stick over the fire and no one had brought salt.
Perfect. You have to squeeze a little of the venom on it.
Right. I think so. You know, that's enjoyable.
Yeah, you get out there and
I found it under my hammock. So that was pretty enjoyable.
That's also good.
So just there's nothing like that for getting it realistic as you hear the rattle as you're taking your hammock down and look under your hammock and there's a nice, I think he's probably 2-footer there. It turned out I'd put my hammock up where there was a chipmunk pathway, Chipmunk Highway, and the rattlesnake also knew about the Chipmunk Highway. And but Kaylin took care of him.
But you didn't die.
I didn't die. The rattlesnake did. We ate him on a stick.
Without the venom.
Without the venom.
Unfortunately, which you can eat, by the way. It's fine.
Can you?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's only inside of your tissue.
In your blood.
Okay.
You can digest it. I mean, don't test me on this. Somebody trust your doctor.
Right. This is not medical advice.
This is researcher, young adult novelist who has read about rattlesnake venom.
Right. Yeah, you did.
And snake venom, various snake venoms before for Right in the Dans. But it is great right now. Like there have been plenty of times when there's crazy news about Trump or Biden or anything else or Ukraine. And I'm driving through northern Idaho with psychotically enormous beauty.
Mm.
You know,
yeah.
And it's empty of all of that chaos.
Right.
And he's telling this story, the drama of the anthill. Like we're sitting here with this big tense drama in our anthill.
Yeah.
And this universe is still dancing.
Yeah.
Exactly as it was.
I mean, the Selway River doesn't care. It's just beautiful.
Yep. It's doing its thing. The fish are doing their thing. You know, everything is in its place and doing what it's supposed to be
11-year-old boys are throwing sand.
Yep.
Like it's good.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
It absolutely is. And don't become consumed with thinking that you need to get into the judgment seat, that you need to find your way up to kind of stand on the armrest next to God's ear and whisper to him, but that there's this thing, I found this other thing.
It is kind of crazy that our phones lead us to do that. Because, being on the Selway, you don't have cell service.
Yeah.
It is wild when you get back and you reshackle yourself into the news cycle.
Into the noise. Into the noise of all the other ants.
Yeah, you're like, can I just plug this right into my brain so that I know exactly what everybody's saying right now? And then every 4 hours later, you're like, oh, that actually wasn't true. That thing that just spun through. Yeah. Oh, Cheadle hasn't been arrested yet. That was a fake.
That thing I just wasted a bunch of time at the water cooler about was fake.
Right.
But I saw it.
Yeah.
But I saw it. Yeah, it's ridiculous. So just get over yourselves. I mean, you see this with people who are obsessed with horror and true crime. We don't need the knowledge of evil. You don't need it.
Right.
Like you don't need to get all the way in there. Some people are called to that.
Right.
Some people have to be called to that. There are counselors, there are detectives, there are judges, there are pastors who have to put on their hip waders and get all the way down in that. Those who are called to that are equipped for that. Just because you have a phone doesn't mean that you are equipped for it.
Yeah.
At all. And that's, positive goods too. People actually always kick against the knowledge of good. Surely we're built for the knowledge of good, not the knowledge of evil. It's like, no, we're not. Childbirth is good. But if you met a guy who's like, oh, I love childbirth videos, I probably watch 5 a day. I try to watch every childbirth video that's available because each one is a miracle.
True.
Each one's a miracle. Knock it off.
You're also a freak.
Yeah. Like walk away, Bob.
Yeah.
It's like, just put your phone down.
Yeah.
That's not helpful.
We've talked about that before with, in Paralandra with the bubble trees.
Yep.
The desire to walk through multiple bubble showers
like you
at
have
once.
that experience, and then be like, but I can have it again. And it's never as, it's never as good. That's exactly the case. So there are a ton of people who try to justify their pursuit of a thing because it's good. God made a woman's body beautiful. Yeah, he did. And it's not for you.
Right.
Like, not for you. And that not for you, those not for you boundaries on ourselves as characters in this narrative are really, really important.
Right. The idea of the obscene being off stage, is something we've lost a little bit. It's not that obscene is dirty. Obscene
it could be truly good and beautiful.
Right.
It could be truly good and beautiful, worthy of poetry, but it's for someone else. That's part of their narrative. It's not part of your narrative. And part of its beauty is that you're not allowed over there.
Yeah.
It's made more beautiful because you are excluded. You would make it uglier.
Right.
So
go cheapen
away.
It.
Yeah. Walk away. And that is really, really important. It's essential. And we see this in scientific experiments. If a thing could be known, we think we have a right to go try to know it.
Yeah.
File this under embryonic stem cells,
the chimera, blending DNA of human and animal,
all the weird
stuff.
Can we make a chimp person? Could we figure out how to? Or even the whole experiment about, can we weaponize a cold virus? Is there a way to? Could this possibly happen? Could this be? Yeah, sure. Stop it. Walk away.
Yeah. Should we save smallpox for when we really, really need it?
Yeah. Well, the sins of sorcery, necromancy, all those things, it does not necessitate that those people pursuing those things were wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that doesn't mean they were incorrect. They were not wrong in what they were trying to do, meaning it didn't work or it was flawed somehow. The problem is authority, and you don't have the right to be there. You don't have the authority to be there and be present there, experimenting there, trying to know those things. Yeah. Walk away. And overwhelmingly in our day, in our time, the overwhelming impulse to try to know, to try to see first, share first, know first, and thoroughly adjudicate everything, and then have zero accountability for all the false things that you've shared.
Yeah.
And all the false things you've believed really quickly, and to put yourself in that judgment seat. That's our big temptation.
Definitely.
As a generation, with our access that we feel that we have. Yeah. That's our temptation.
Oh, speaking of correction, Jack Black's bandmate. Yes. Bandmate, not Jack Black.
Actually, that's
himself.
A good callback.
Happy birthday to you. Make a wish, Canada. Don't miss Trump next time.
Because what did we say about that? It's like, is he going to find out what it's like to be, have a Bud Light moment?
Right.
Jack Black proved himself to be pretty intelligent.
He canceled the tour.
Canceled his tour and threw his bandmate and lifelong friend so far under the bus.
Tenacious D.
He just has so far under the bus.
Kneecapped.
Whatever he said. I was blindsided by this. Like, had no idea. And then also called it hate speech. It's like, okay, go Jack. I mean, like, I think that he is not unaware of his value. And how many millions of dollars did he make the Super Mario Brothers movie just by singing Peaches?
Totally.
And being Bowser, because the movie's trash. So,
we kind of enjoyed it. Maybe we have to talk about it.
It's bad.
The Peaches scene alone, I think.
But then you have him as Bowser and the Peaches song and everything else. It's like, that was huge.
Also, I mean, he's looking at it. I've got Kung Fu Panda 5 releasing this next year.
Yeah, 4 already sucked.
Right. I need this to succeed.
He's not dumb.
Yeah.
So it might not be that he's a noble and honorable character. I don't need to know that again, but I do know he's not dumb because it was fast.
Yeah.
That was a fast reaction.
It was quick and
his bandmate says next
merciless.
time don't miss Trump. And he's just like, nope. Absolutely not, dude.
Tour is over and we won't be, whatever, making money from 10 years ago. So he probably did that as a favor to his bandmate.
Yeah. It's pretty wild. But so good on Jack Black. And he was not the one who said it.
Yeah.
It was his bandmate who said it.
Right.
So
speaking of correcting things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, but what we're jumping in today is we just finished, we're at 2 Samuel now. We just finished 1 Samuel. And one of the character types we haven't discussed recently that I wanted to kind of get up there is the idea of the quick start and the fail. So start strong, fail like Saul did. I'm thinking of maybe Boromir is another example. Susan Pevensey, some of those characteristics. I'm wondering, can we talk about that moment of somebody who begins with such potential and then ends up like the seed in the parable, crashing and burning, or perhaps withering and dying?
Yeah, I think it all starts. I'm not saying that this is the universal cause ultimately in every single story, but I think it all begins when somebody shifts the centrality of themselves and their self-worth. So Saul was incredibly humble
at the beginning, yeah,
to a fault.
Okay.
Which also kind of reveals a little bit of self-absorption in a different way. He's hiding.
Because you're looking at when he's hiding among the baggage and he says, I don't want to be anointed,
Yep.
Am I not the least? Oh, maybe he doesn't say that. Now I'm blending things. But you're saying he started out.
He starts as a humble dude and also kind of probably too much so. But then you look at these characters and you watch them shift in different ways into their own centrality. So Lewis described this as a king who believes that the kingdom exists for his benefit versus a king who understands that he exists for the benefit of the kingdom. And like that you exist in your moment to serve. And the more elevated you are in your own narrative, centrality of, the story, all that means is the more you are called to the service of others from that position. You're in a position where you can actually serve these people. You are dad to these kids. They don't exist to accommodate themselves to your schedule and to your life. Yeah. Like you exist to lay down your life for them and to seed these childhoods richly. And I've watched this happen with a ton of parents, by the way. It's pretty sad.
The quick, the fast start with the followed by the failure, or are you talking about the flipping of priorities?
Flipping of priorities, which results in
the burn,
like a really
in
intangible, in this kind of intangible sickness. They can't figure out what's going on with their kids. And so, but with Saul, he begins to think that the throne in Israel exists to serve him. He does not think of himself as the first servant of Israel. He does not think of himself as the guy who's to lay down his life for this nation, for this people. He thinks of like all
kings because his vow starts with that honey vow, the one of like, hey, if anybody eats anything before I'm avenged on my enemies, they're going to be dead.
Yep.
Which is a backwards view of what's going on.
He starts to go that direction, and it breaks him. And then you look at Susan, it's just more vanity. It's presented as vanity, which is a variation of the same thing.
Yeah, lipstick and I can't remember what else.
And I'd say that if Susan had been forgetting herself in that role, if she was not spending time thinking about herself, if she was thinking about Narnia, if she was thinking about everyone else as she was in that service, then when she went back to the real world and lived her life in the real world, and she continued to think that way about those around her, she would have remained faithful, wouldn't have lost touch.
So you think in Narnia, she's exhibiting some of that problem? Was that what you're saying?
Well, I think that there's, I'm not saying that she's a corrupt character in Narnia, but I think that Lewis is not inconsistent in picking her and not Lucy.
Yeah, because she's, when you think
term.
Horse and His Boy, she's the great beauty that is being wooed by all the different princes.
Exactly. Yeah.
And kind of naively.
And basically doesn't survive that experience. But that's I'm connecting a lot of dots he didn't put there, but it's not Lucy. This isn't Lucy who forgets. This is Susan who forgets. So anytime you have somebody who starts thinking about themselves and how to make things better for themselves, you start to break. It starts to break down. Now, an example of how I've seen parents do this: as your kids age, you want them to have their own lives. You want them to have their own desires, their own goals, their own pursuits. And you want them to grow up into those. And the question is, do you smack and crush their dreams and their goals and their pursuits? Because no, I have some time off. Like, I have some time off. So it's my schedule dominates your schedule. I have a 4-day weekend. So we're out of here. And that kid is working towards something. That kid has has some target, has some goal, has some desire they're pursuing. And they just got smacked because their schedule is meaningless. Their life is kind of fake. And so they might not rebel. They might not be upset by this once because it's fun, because we're going somewhere. But all they did is they just learned to just turn and walk away from something.
From the thing they're pursuing.
From the thing they're pursuing, because dad's schedule trumps their schedule. And so they turned and they walked away from theirs, and they've learned to turn and walk away.
Yeah.
And so when I'm talking to a dad who is asking me, like, man, why is my kid so apathetic? Like, why aren't they driven? Why aren't they like, I'm driven? Why isn't my son driven? And I could go back through 2 years of dad's driven, which means he sees his goals that as constantly subsuming his son's. And his son hasn't had a binding goal in years, because they'll just get voided whenever dad happens to, have something he wants to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think too, for a lot of young couples, you're trying hard to build a family culture.
Yeah.
And then I think you've talked about this with the Wilson family dinner, which has become legendary.
Yeah.
The goal of the Wilson family dinner is not to bring in more and more of Wilson grandchildren into the family dinner so it becomes bigger and bigger. The goal is for the family dinner to kick you on into the rest of the week and your lives.
Yeah.
And
the other thing is there's no guilt. The goal is for it to be joy, and people are trying to make it if they can.
Yeah.
It's like, but there's never been guilt associated with an inability to make that dinner.
Sure.
And overwhelmingly, parents do that.
Yeah.
Parents have this tendency to be like, no, Johnny, no, Jill.
Yeah. Oh, are you missing this week? We thought you were going to be here. Even when it's a good reason.
Yeah. Like, oh, so sad.
Yeah.
Shut up.
Yeah.
If it is sad, you don't need to say it. You need to encourage them, because they're having to make a choice and they're having to miss something that they would like to make. And if it isn't sad, you're not going to make it so by guilting like that.
I do think that is something that we're kind of, as I've got an 11-year-old now, I'm trying to think about, strong family culture, like it, but also 11-year-old boys, they're going to want to go out and do things.
Yeah.
And so I got to make sure that it's not like an ingrown family culture, that every time my kid tries to step out and try something outside of the family, that I'm like turning it back, be like, oh no, we're all together. We all have the same opinion. We all do these things at the same time. I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. So a couple examples. Sports are easy, but it can be academic. It can be intellectual, where a kid has a goal. A kid has a thing that they care about, that they're working toward. And this is that thing. And then you're like, no, it's family time. And you yank them away from it. That's tough.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty tough. And it creates this intangible catechism for them that it ingrains. It can be a really subconscious resentment of family time and of what parents are doing, or it could just be kind of neutering, where they just learn to never really pursue something, to never really want something, because it might get yanked away from them at any time.
Okay. Because I've heard you treat your kids' goals like bindingly.
Yeah.
Like if a kid sets a goal, then it needs to happen.
Yeah. And we'll have a conversation of like, is this real? Is this a real goal? Do you mean this? Like, because I will fully support you in this chase, but do you mean it?
Okay.
Like, and let's talk about what the cost will be and what you'll have to do and all the steps. And And I'm more likely to be an accountability person for that goal and to try to facilitate that goal than I am to overrule it. As a coach, I have had a lot of conversations with parents, some of whom I coach their kids, but a lot of whom I don't coach their kids. Like I don't. They talk to me because they've heard me on the podcast. I'm somewhere and they have a question. They've got a parenting question. So some of these I've had conversations with my athletes' parents, but most of them are not my athletes' parents. It's like most of the conversations aren't. And a lot of it's pretty heartbreaking because there's, almost always discontentment with their kid is how it starts. And then I'm asking them like, okay, like they just don't throw themselves all the way into something. They don't pursue it. And it's like, well, how committed are you to that? And it's usually these little stories that come up where it's like, well, my son is on this team and we're able to get him in there as a homeschooler, but their games are on Saturdays. And so he misses 8 out of 10 of them, but he just hasn't been able to really, rise up. It's like, he's so passive. Like he's out there on the field, he's on the diamond, or he's on the soccer pitch, or he's on the rugby pitch. And it's just, there's no fire there. It's like, what? I couldn't remember what it was like to be 13. Yeah. I can remember what it was like to have that fire for that game, for that competition that was as big a stage as I could get onto at the age of 13. The idea of mom yanking me out of 8 out of 10 because it was family night. Like, oh man, I better turn that fire off or else I'm going to hate my mom. Yeah. I've got the choice of like, I can mute this or I'm going to hate my mom. And they don't see that. Family time is really important to us. And that's why we constantly smack and punish our children for being members of this family, where they just don't get the opportunities. They don't get to pursue those things, any number of things. And so, I've talked to track parents, whose kids are running in Christian schools or homeschoolers who are running in the public schools. I've talked to rugby parents. I've talked to soccer parents. I've talked to basketball parents, football parents, girls volleyball parents. All these conversations that have flowed my way because I'm out here kind of publicly as a sports dad, and people know who I am when I talk about coaching on the podcast. And I would say that like 9 out of 10 times it's the parents' fault, and the parents are suffocating and crushing their kids' aggression and their dreams and their goals. 9 out of 10 times across homeschools, private schools, everything else. It's just overwhelmingly them training their kids to be neutral and apathetic and roll with it passive. Not the kind of person who says, what do you want? Let's talk about it. You pick a goal. And then I am going to be, this fire in the hearth available to support this. It's like, and there's plenty, believe me, there's plenty of like sports parents that go too far. In America, especially. Yeah, I think we have like plenty. We've talked about that. Yeah. So I don't want to pretend like that's not real. That's real. That's a very real ditch over there. And there's a lot of idolatrous parents in there. And with a son who plays AAU and so on, I've seen plenty of them. Yeah. And a car wreck of a family because that's all they do. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And when that goes wrong, it's almost always the sacrifice of other kids to the one kid. Yeah. It's like but that's kind of what we're talking about right now is like, one of the biggest start strong fade would be Christian kids. Yeah. Like a Christian kid who starts strong and then burns out in college and is no longer about anything. Yeah. That's what we're talking about. If you think about, I've encouraged parents before to think about themselves as secondary characters. Do not think about yourself as the primary character. Yeah. The kids do not exist as secondary characters in your primary narrative. They each have their own primary threads, and then you are a secondary character that they all share. It's like you're the secondary character in the early chapters who gets to establish their patterns of behavior and their loves and their hates and really enforce their affections in different ways. And so the start strong fade looks like parents who want to raise Christian kids. They get married, they're committed to staying together, they start having babies, they have more than they can take care of. And so they start sacrificing the individual kids and their individual personalities and giftings to efficiency of the whole.
Yeah.
And they start running a very pragmatic state in their family, and they have to, because look how many we have. And so we treat them as this singular blob. As we treat them as a unit instead of as these individual lead characters who need to be equipped to go lead lives separately.
Right.
And I should be sacrificing my schedule and in every way that I can to strengthen and empower them. So it's, that's overwhelmingly how I see it happen. And even, it's not like I'm against big families. I have a big family, but I've seen plenty of people who just can't support their kids effectively because there's too many of you, Billy. And so almost blaming the kid. There's too many of you. Mom and pop can't do this. I actually saw one mom in front of me. And this was like, whoo. In front of me, talking to me, trying to get ideas from me in another conversation. The conversation was broad. It touched on this partly, but it was other stuff too. And then she had a couple adopted kids, and she was talking about their ingratitude. And I was like, whoa, like this is kind of an awkward thing. And she was like, I mean, plenty of people can have family trips and can do all these other things and all this other stuff. But some families, rescue orphans from Ethiopia, thank you, with their money and time. And so they can't afford to do this other stuff.
Nate's wanting to crawl under a rock.
I'm like, oh my gosh, you miserable person. This is so bad.
You're holding your kid's adoption over their entire life. Yeah.
It's like, it's just, it's wretched. I see, but that's like a heightened version, but I see that all the time, and it's hard not to do that. So as dad paying the bills, as mom,
right.
Trying to mother all these kids, it's a constant sacrifice.
Yeah.
And you're being told by the culture to find your me time and your, your self-care and everything else.
Well, I've realized it's what it is it's you compromise and you say, you know what? I thought I needed this for my kids, but that's too hard.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to default back to our perimeter. And I wanted to do this with my kid, but we're not going to.
So if your kid says, hey, my goal is to sail around the world, you can be like, you know what? We need to find a different goal.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
You want to parent them and teach them.
Yeah.
We got to find a different goal because we live in Kansas and I can't afford a sailboat, nor can I afford all the, all the travel and all that kind of stuff.
Nor can you swim well enough.
Let's go. Let's find a goal that is actually, and the best goals are goals that are obtainable, but barely.
Mm-hmm.
Like you really have to stretch and work to get there. It's not far-fetched and impossible.
Yeah.
And it's not so close that it's easily achieved.
Yeah.
It's actually going to require you to really exert prolonged effort in a singular direction in order to get there, but it's gettable.
Yeah.
Like it is gettable with that. And you're going to support that kind of goal. Really far-fetched, like dreams.
Yeah.
That's different. That's a different kind of a thing.
Sure.
We're not just trying to plant dream flags.
Sure.
We're trying to train them in pursuing these goals. But yeah, that's the example of I see it in characters. I see it in scripture. I see it in parents. I see it in church leadership. I see it in political leadership. Absolutely. Where people immediately flip around.
Okay.
I see it in employees. Employees start to think that their job exists for them and for their benefit. It is theirs and they possess it. They don't think of themselves as needing to get a return on it for the bosses, the people who gave them that job.
Yeah.
They are the sitting there receiving it.
Yes. Yeah, so you're saying that burnout, that moment of flip, and then you jump to parents, just give examples of it. But it does seem like that checks out with them. I mean, this is going to sound a little random, but Judas is another example of those, right? One of the greatest, start strong.
It's a fantastic example of that. Yeah.
Because like you're saying, he started strong, cast out demons, saw this mission grow and grow, thought, and then there's the moment of flipping.
And he's thinking too much like a shareholder. He's thinking too much like an owner of the moment and of the narrative.
Yeah.
He's not
she poured the perfume that should have been given to me.
He's resenting the amount of money. He's resenting the decisions, the tactical decisions, the financial decisions. He believes himself, callback. He thinks he should be in the judgment seat. he thinks it's his call.
Yeah.
He gets to make this decision. He gets to climb up there and act like he's got a voice on whether or not that money is wasted or not.
Yeah.
On the perfume. And he, gets to try to force Christ's hand and be like a political mover shaker.
Because Jesus had told him, I'm going to die. And all of them said, no, that's not a good plan. And then Judas took it much further.
Yep.
So
the question is, and I think it's pretty obvious, did Judas actually think that Christ was going to let himself be crucified? And I think the answer is clearly no.
Okay, because he killed himself afterward. The disappointment there of
the full despair.
Yeah.
Like the complete and total despair, the suicide, everything else. This backfired. I think he was fully expecting this to be that moment. Like he was like Mary pushing Christ to make water into wine when it wasn't time yet. He was pushing, I believe, when it wasn't time yet, out of his own controlling mover and shakerness, the guy who wanted to be pulling the strings. And so he forced Christ into direct conflict with the Sanhedrin and Rome.
Yeah.
And was expecting this to be the moment.
To be on the winning side.
This to be the big moment.
Yeah, because I guess all the disciples were arguing, can we be at your left or right hand? We know he's one of those.
Yeah. So I don't think that he was expecting Christ to be crucified. And for that 3 days, he wasn't expecting for it to hit despair, to really actually go into death. And so he didn't have faith. He didn't have faith that Christ was going to come back from the dead.
Right.
But he did have faith that Christ was never going to end up on that cross and was going to overthrow Roman occupation and everything else. That's my belief. Now, this is narratively, it's a little bit speculative.
Yeah.
It's like I can't prove that beyond a shadow of a doubt, but that's my read that makes sense of his total despair and suicide, which is a form of repentance without true repentance. Like he's broken.
Yeah, it's
that
not
Christ was crucified. This is not what he wanted. That's not what he wanted. I think it's thunderingly obvious this is not what he wanted. So what did he want? Well, he wanted the Romans. He believed in Christ enough to know they're going to get driven out.
Because it doesn't make sense that, he hated Jesus and wanted to kill him. Like that one narrative reason doesn't make sense. Doesn't sync with the despair.
Demonic possession. People have talked about that being, a tool of Satan.
Yeah, Satan entered him. Yeah.
Like, sure. Like, okay, there's that. That's a thread. And then there would just be malice and destruction. And then we think we see the other Judas minus the possession hanging himself, except for the fact that suicide is not true repentance.
Right.
That's not actual repentance. But anyway, there's other versions of that narrative. There's other reads of that narrative that I think have validity, but that's the read I have. And I think that it is a perfect example of, regardless of my particular read, of Judas being in service and then moving to trying to be in control. Make it serving his ends. I am serving your ends versus I am trying to use you to serve mine. Yeah. And as soon as you see Boromir, you see Boromir doing that. I think Susan, and it's a pivot of vanity. I think we see that in Saul. I think we see that in a lot of places. Incidentally, we see it in David as well.
I was going to ask, do you see him as that start strong, fade model? Obviously, he is good soil. Like he is a seed that fell in the good soil.
Yeah, I wouldn't impose that whole parable on him, but yes.
Right.
So starts very, very strong. He lives for the Lord's service.
And succeeds in many very challenging instances.
But then you see him start to prioritize his appetites and his desire above what's good. Mm-hmm. Above God's, above Israel's. And so he is willing to murder a man who's really a loyal, noble guy. He's willing to murder a man for his wife. He's willing to just take whatever he feels like taking, and then he's broken by that, loses a son. And then you see his inability as a father afterwards, his passivity just kind of rots out his household.
Wow. I mean, Jesus, when he follows up with that, is just says something very straightforward, that the good seed on good soil are just those who hear the word and receive it.
Yep.
Like there's nothing nothing complicated
Yeah.
about that, as opposed to those who get choked out by thorns or
Yeah.
the quick fast.
So I do over and over again. This is all from Lewis, where he talks about the king existing for the kingdom and not the kingdom for the king. Like, why does a king exist? Rightly understood. Why does a hero exist? Rightly understood. And then underneath that, why would a protagonist exist? A main character exist? Rightly understood. For their own pleasure, for their own, aggrandizement, like why? It's like, or to go sacrifice, to go assume risk, to go take the hit for others.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that works. Why does a dad exist? Why does a teacher exist?
Yeah. And you can see it in yourself. It's super, super easy for a teacher to start to think that this classroom, these kids that you're supposed to teach are just your trial, your burden. Like you're just a main character going through some sort of purgatory, instead of you're here to serve these little fatheads, these individuals who don't understand how much you're sacrificing. Like they don't understand that. No, they don't. They really don't. It doesn't matter. Like, you're there to sacrifice. You're not there to have them understand how much you're sacrificing. Yeah. You're there to try to help them. You see it in dads who I had a long day. I don't want to talk right now. Yeah. It's like all that. You see it in moms who just seek pragmatic efficiency, and that kind of flattens children. And you also see it in families that impose family time like it's some kind of purgation. And I've seen that a lot, actually. So here, come suffer through it.
In our family, I know stay with each other.
Yeah, I know all your friends are out playing sand volleyball, but we are sitting here and staring at each other and listening to Dad's devotional on a Friday night.
Right. Dad should have found a different time for the family devotional.
Yes. And with ice cream. And what are you battling?
Right.
Like, let's put it this way. If you were to say, hey kids, today there's no Saturday chores because we're doing waffles and devotional.
Right.
Like,
are you pitting the Bible against being outside in the summer?
Yeah. What are you replacing? What are you doing? So that trade-off, whenever you're making an exchange, the trade-off reinforces and catechizes the kids to value it or not. And so all my kids remember sitting there listening to stories, eating ice cream. And some of them were too little to remember what stories we were reading, but they remember that. They remember that community and that sensation. And I had to not care about all the clinking.
Sure.
I had to tell the kids, try to be quiet with your spoons. But guess what? I just handed 5 kids like spoons and bowls of ice cream. So it's going to happen.
Right.
There's going to be plenty of clinking, and I got to just not care that that's part of the percussion of the scene. Like that's what we're working with. So which things are you exchanging? Like, what do you do?
Yeah. Are you doing the trade of the thing, the gold on the altar for the altar?
Yep.
Did you just switch it?
Yeah. And I've seen the same thing with chores too, as long as we're going to keep beating this horse. The nature of chores is tricky. It can be really, really good and really, really valuable. And it can also just be dad getting himself off the hook, mom getting herself off the hook, imposing something on the kids from them and creating that dynamic and relationship that you don't really want.
Yeah. So
it's always do it for their benefit, but you also want to navigate it really, really well.
Yeah. Be careful.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fun. I'm now thinking that you may have hit on something, and that Anakin, it even works for Anakin. That when he flipped from I'm a Jedi.
Yeah.
And then to I can control and protect everybody. That's sort of the nexus of that transition. And if it works for something as inane as the Star Wars backstory, I think it might be deep.
This can be used really, really well. Your own centrality can be used really well. If you're in a new place, if you're going to a new place, you don't know people, assuming the center, meaning assuming the center of this little solar system of all these strangers and everything else, but assuming the center and also understanding that assuming that centrality requires you to begin serving them and to begin giving to them. the way my mom would put this, she put it this way, talking to my daughters, is even when you're not on your ground, be the hostess. Wherever you are, be the hostess. And don't sit back to be served and hosted. Wherever you are, like, assume responsibility for hostessing, putting other people at their ease, no matter how uncomfortable you are, putting them at their ease and trying to be, like I was saying earlier in this podcast, be good weather for people around you. Like, be the climate. And if you assume the center in a negative way, that means I'm wanting to be entertained, I'm wanting to be served, I'm wanting to be admired, I'm wanting them to look at me. But if you assume the center the way Christ thinks of the center, then you immediately start to serve those orbiting you. And that's what centrality is for. Centrality is not for importance or pomposity. Centrality is for service.
Yeah. And that repeated flip, when you get that backwards, is when we start to see the potential for the seed withering away.
Yeah. Over and over and over again.
Well, that's great.
There we go. This has been a meandering SASF.
Imagine the well-read man. Do you see a machine dressed in tweed, gorging on information? This book is not about becoming that kind of reader. The well-read man wakes up and consults with Moses on his way to work.
And God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which hath brought thee out of the land.
He sips his coffee and ponders the wisdom of Hannibal's elephants crossing the Alps. He turns furrow-browed philosophers upside down and takes their lunch money. He changes his oil and deliberates with Peter Drucker about effective management practices. He regales his wife with the tale of Monet's water lilies in the gardens at Giverny. He sings with Sandra Boynton as his toddler's eyes grow heavy. This book is about becoming that man. Be as human as you can be. Learn how to read a book.